Agriculture, food production, outdoor resources will come to order. We are going to start as a subcommittee because we don't have a quorum yet. We will break when we do get a quorum and take that roll real quick. We're going to have two bills on the agenda today. Senate Bill 1397 is up first. Senator Henderson, so whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. For the record, Mike Henderson, State Senator from the 3rd Senatorial District, here to present Senate Bill 1397 on water regulations. Senate Bill 1397 contains two provisions. The first removes the cap on the clean water permit fees, and the second addresses water return flows to federal reservoirs. Part 1, the clean water permit fees. Senate Bill 1397 removes the $5,000 statutory cap on clean water permit fees in Missouri so the Department of Natural Resources can update fees to support the state's clean water program. The Clean Water Program regulates more than 11,790 facilities statewide, including municipal, industrial, agricultural, development, and stormwater sites. Currently, the program generates about $5.3 million annually in permit fees, while the total cost to operate the program is approximately $20.3 million per year. Permit fees have not been updated since 2013. And current law prohibits fees above $5,000, which limits the state's ability to adjust fees to reflect increased operating costs. Removing the cap does not automatically raise fees. I want to make that clear. What it does, but it allows the Missouri Clean Water Commission to establish an updated fee structure through a public rulemaking process, helping ensure the program can remain financially sustainable in the future without relying on general revenue. Part 2, the water return flow. It updates the Missouri water law to allow water providers such as municipalities like Springfield, Missouri, to receive credit for return flows to reservoirs owned by the Army Corps of Engineers. A return flow refers to the treated water from a wastewater or water reclamation facility that is discharged back into a reservoir. The bill grants entities that store water in a federal reservoir the right to return flows they generate. Allowing credit for these return flows would enable communities to reuse treated wastewater as a new water supply, potentially saving communities tens of millions of dollars by converting existing wastewater discharges into usable water resources. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator. If we could pause just a second. Christian, do you care to call the roll?
Senators Bean.
Here.
Berger.
Here.
Bernstetter. Crawford. Gregory. Here. McCreary. Here. Washington.
We have a quorum. Thank you for that, Senator. So we are official now. We'll make sure you're official. But any questions for the Senator? Senator McCreary.
Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
So we, as a legislature, have done a lot of things with fees this session, and it makes me a little nervous, quite honestly, when we're talking about cutting taxes, but then the body seems to be comfortable with raising fees. Are there instances that you know of where that we would need a fee of over $5,000?
I'm not trying to avoid your question because I could probably do some guessing on that, but the DNR, I think, will be here to testify and can probably answer some of those. I've worked with them. I think they're here today. And they'll be able to answer, I think, some of those questions. I think the idea, though, I will go into this. I think the idea behind it is it doesn't mean we're going to automatically raise them, but we haven't raised them in years.
Yeah.
And we know we're going to have some problems coming up, so I think they're trying to look forward. I don't want to speak for them, but my understanding is they're trying to look forward to say that we could use some rulemaking processes for that because we all know how important water is.
Yeah, and it's refreshing that we're trying to do something proactive on the front end versus like on the tail end trying to figure something out.
We all know we have a budget that's maybe getting tighter. We know that we may have some things in the future, so exactly what you're talking about, I think is happening.
And then another question has to do with we have these reservoirs and we have the Army Corps of Engineers. Are there cases where the water flow's not actually going back to the reservoirs that they started out in? And how does all of that work?
It probably does. I'm more familiar with what happened in Springfield from what I've been told. I think there's some people that will be able to answer that. Hey, I'm not trying to avoid your question. I think some people can answer that.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Any further questions for the Senator? Seeing none, just don't forget when you come up to testify, please leave your witness form on the table. And first up, in favor of Senate Bill 1397, please proceed. Make sure you state your name and make sure the microphone is on there.
good morning. My name is Roddy Rogers. I'm Executive Director of Southwest Missouri Water. I'm here to testify in support of the bill for the water portion of the bill that you just mentioned. And I've been Executive Director for a while. We've worked on this for 2 decades, and I'm testifying on behalf of that organization and the almost 1 million citizens that we serve. This is something that serves a lot of people, and we've been working for affordable, adequate, long-term water supply for a long time. And so we had notable progress, most notably in January 2025, and we got approval for reallocation of storage from the Pentagon from Stockton Lake. So I want to highlight 3 reasons that we're in support of this. And one is it saves time and money, and second is it's good for all of Missouri, and third is it provides for a better way for the state and federal governments to interact with the Corps. So the first one on time and money, I mentioned we spent over 20 years on the process. We've also spent $5 million on studies. We'll spend another $27 million on the reallocation. So it's a long process and it costs a lot of money. And to be able to use these return flows as credits towards a water account, so to speak, allows like a new water source. And for Springfield City Utilities is a good example. They take water from Stockton now and return some of that to Stockton. If they can get credit for that, that's immediate new source worth millions of gallons and millions of dollars. Second reason I mentioned is that it's not just good for Southwest Missouri and Springfield, it's good for all of Missouri. All communities can use this as a tool because it's essentially recycling water. And the way it works is the Corps, let's say they give you 10 buckets of water, and the entity that has 10 buckets takes 7 of them out. They keep track of that, so you got 3 left. But if they can dump 2 of those buckets back into the lake, they now have 5 buckets left instead of the 3. So again, it's immediate source, it's recycling water, and that's usually the least cost alternative in terms of economics and environment. And then the third reason is that it's a good way for the Corps to interact with the state and federal governments because it empowers the state to increase their sources with minimal involvement from the federal government. And they're all good with that. So it's a good combination of national unity and local autonomy. So this is a win for the citizens of Missouri. It's a win for the state and federal governments. Water is a huge economic driver. Investors are saying it'll be the resource that defines this century like oil did the last. But most importantly, it sustains our lives, literally. And it's a good way to ensure the future. This is something that we've been working on a long time, and it'll spur other projects to generate the same kind of thing. So we respectfully request your support.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Senator Berger?
Clarify what you're talking about on the $27 million you're going to spend on reallocation. What does that actually detail?
That's what we'll pay for the actual reallocated storage. That is what the Corps will charge us for that.
Is that like the piping to get it back to Stockton?
No, that's just the water source.
Just the water source.
The infrastructure will probably be between $1 billion and $2 billion.
I don't know that I still understand. Then what is the $27 million for?
For the storage in the lake, the rights to pull water from Stockton Lake.
Okay.
They allocate if you want to picture it as a slice of storage, and that's your slice of storage that you can pull water from.
Okay, thank you.
And they reallocate it, so they take it from something else that's been used, so the net effect is 0 on the lake.
Thank you.
Any further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of Senate Bill 1397, please come forward.
I'll let you go first. Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Lacey Hirschvogel, and I am testifying in support of Senate Bill 1397 on behalf of Missouri Association of Municipal Utilities. We represent 120 municipal water systems across the state of Missouri, and it includes the Southwest Missouri project that Roddy just spoke about. So currently, the reallocation process is a very lengthy process, and it is very costly. As he stated, it was $27.5 million for the storage capacity that they have. So, and that is for Southwest Missouri Water, which includes the city of Springfield. Well, the city of Springfield, their northeast wastewater treatment plant puts millions of gallons of water back into that watershed every day, so they will receive credit for that. So that'll save them money on that $27.5 million. So they won't need additional storage as the, population grows or there's economic development in the area. They wouldn't need to purchase more storage, if that makes sense. So this bill, it really provides certainty for long-term water planning, reducing reliance on these reallocation processes that are lengthy and time-consuming and costly. And so, the Corps does recognize this as a great flexibility. They understand the need for this cooperative federalism. They understand the need for this flexibility in the states. They just said that the state does have to have a law that allows for this. And so that's why we're coming to you today. States like Tennessee, South Carolina, and Kentucky have already passed some similar legislation. So we're just looking for that opportunity to provide the same type of flexibilities with the Corps. So with that, I will take any questions.
Any questions for this witness, Senator Berger?
I know you were kind of explaining my question earlier, but how do they measure the return? How do they measure the return that goes back to them?
So basically, they will take what the city of Springfield, and it's not every single plant, to answer Tracy's question. So if it doesn't go directly back into that water, if it doesn't go directly back into that watershed, they will not get credit for that. So it has to go back into the watershed, and then they would get credit for the, if it's 3 million gallons per day that they
Taken out?
discharge back into the watershed, they would get a portion of that returning to Stockton Lake, essentially.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any further questions? Senator McCreary?
Just a quick follow-up on that question. So there's incentive then, or motivation, to make sure as much gets back to the reservoir as possible.
Yes.
So, because
Yes.
it's a win-win for everybody then, so.
Yes, Senator.
Okay, very good,
Yes.
thank you.
Any further questions? Senator Washington?
Hi, thank you. I just have one quick question, because I'm not good at this at all, but I know in my community we had a very severe issue with a creek that was owned by the Army Corps of Engineers, and it took almost 35 years to be able for anybody to work on that. So would those who have the rights, would they only be like municipalities or government entities, or we're talking about private people as well?
So basically, you have to go. So we're talking, I think, about two different things. So this is a project where it's a entity. So in this case, it would be the Southwest Missouri Water Coalition that receives a reallocation of Stockton Lake to use that water. And then, so basically what this bill does is just provides the credit for any city within the Southwest Missouri Water Project that discharges water back into that watershed to receive, so they would receive credit for that storage.
So it wouldn't be like an individual homeowner or a business or anything?
No, it would be a discharger with significant water being put back into that watershed.
Okay, and so that, I'll ask Mike later, because what I'm trying to understand here is, we only talking about governmental entities, or are we also talking about, say for Stockton Lake, that could also be like one of the big beautiful, well, nothing is as beautiful as 18th and Vine, but some of the things like, hotels or resorts or whatever, who could sometimes use more water than some of the small cities. So that's what I was trying to understand. Or are we going to be allowing private citizens and businesses take advantage of this as well? And if you don't know, that's fine.
I'm not actually sure, and
Okay.
I can get that answer
Okay,
for
thank you. Could you please, because that'll have a determining factor on how I feel about it. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, in favor of Senate Bill 1397, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Fred Dreiling today in support of the bill representing city utilities of Springfield. Senator Washington, to answer your question, there's already an agreement in place with the Corps of Engineers to take this water. This just gives city utilities and other people that are part of that agreement credit for restoring water back into the system. And that's really all it does. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions to this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up, in favor of Senate Bill 1397.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Lynn Schlosser here today on behalf of Missouri American Water. We'd like to go on the record in support of the bill.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of Senate Bill 1397, please come forward. Oops.
Right in the way. No. It's just one of those days.
It needs to be more.
Now it's on. Good morning. Allie Gatwood, Legislative Liaison for Missouri Department of Natural Resources, and I have Heather Peters with me. I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm the director of the Water Protection Program.
All right. So I'm going to read a statement, and then she's going to answer any questions that we may have. And Lacey did a really great job of answering the reservoir return flow questions, so she did a great job with that. So I'm just going to move on to the permit fees part. All right. Good morning. The department needs the fee cap removed or raised to support the fee concepts that are being considered and will not move forward without the support of our stakeholders. Fee cap removal or increase will not result in all permits being raised to that higher cost. Of our over 11,000 permits, only 288 or 2% are at the current fee cap. We have reached out to the most affected. The common agreement is that everyone wants a Missouri program under the control of Missouri, not EPA, regulating our Missouri facilities. Raising or removing the fee cap is not the end of the process. Any fee concept must be agreed upon by our stakeholders and permittees and presented before the Clean Water Commission at least 3 times with opportunity for input. The department will continue to engage with permittees on the best path forward to sustain a Missouri water program here in Missouri. This legislation is vital to the continued operation and authority of the Missouri Water Protection Program.
And I can answer the question you asked earlier about the $5,000 fee cap. How many sites are at that? She mentioned it's 288. If we raise the fee cap, it would be a similar percentage of sites that would potentially be above that 5,000. What we're talking about when we're talking about those sites is many of you were involved 2 years ago on it was referred to as the Denali legislation about land application, these massive basins, these massive land application projects. Those would be one of the ones that we would put above the 5,000 for something of that size, were it to ever be permitted or authorized in accordance with that new law. We're also talking about power plants. Power plants are one of the more significant facilities that we regulate. There are literally dozens of federal regulations that apply to them. They're very complex. And in most of the other states, they've told us that those permit fees can range anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 a year. So our current $5,000 fee cap is just not reflective of the work we're putting on those. In addition to the power plants, we also have spoken to a number of the large agrochemical facilities, as well as some of our largest meat processors. They are extremely interested in keeping Missouri regulatory authority for their sites. EPA has significant interest in meat processors, and we have a really great working relationship with those facilities. We understand the importance here in Missouri, and we understand how they're operating, and they do a fantastic job. And so we have routinely been aligned with the meat processors defending those permits, both for the public interests and public concerns, as well as ensuring that those are permitted the way we would like rather than the EPA preferences. The same thing holds true for a few of our largest CAFOs, and as well as a few of the very, very large, non-publicly owned domestic wastewater facilities. So that is typically DOD facilities. They're like a small city, they're not publicly owned, their fees are calculated in a very different way, and so they too could be impacted by those. But those are the type of sites that we're typically talking about. As Allie mentioned, we've reached out to all of those, and we are continuing to hold meetings to discuss what that looks like, how to implement it, how to stagger that increase over time in a way that is feasible for Missouri businesses who definitely want to see DNR at their doorstep, not EPA. So I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have about that.
Any questions for these witnesses? Senator Berger.
What about cities along the Mississippi River that take the water out of the river and then return it back to the river? Is there any credits for anything like that?
So that's tied to the Water Resources and Water Reservoir Program. I don't think that is, well, first off, that's not our team. I'm not sure I can answer that question, but I think the answer to that question is no.
But I'll get an exact answer for you.
Any further questions for these witnesses? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor
Thanks so
of
much.
Senate Bill 1397.
I'm Scott Hayes. I'm the Executive Director of the Missouri Pork Association. I'm here to testify in favor of 1397. I'm just here to talk about the fee portion. The pork producers appreciate our partnership with DNR in protecting the environment. It's a great partnership that has not always been true in my career, but we do have a great partnership, and we look at them as partners in protecting the environment, and we appreciate that. As the Senator mentioned, we're moving to more of a pay-to-play type system in the state of Missouri, and the pig farmers in the state are willing to participate in that to a certain degree, that we are the player in these fees. There's other players also. There's some of the things that we do with our CAFO permits and reporting that are required by the citizens of the state that don't necessarily do producers any good. So we feel like the citizens should pay for their portion as well. But our main concern is the third group that doesn't pay anything at all, that are driving up the cost of fees, driving up the cost of the department. And that's the group that constantly sue the department. We've paid out tens of thousands of dollars for a misplaced comma or a hyphen missing in a permit application. They also like to call the department and make frivolous complaints, and by law the department has to send someone out to investigate those. So we have staff that are going out investigating the same frivolous issues time and time again when there's nothing there. So we would certainly like to see all players pay for the portion of the cost that they cause the department. If they want to play, they need to pay as well. So that would be our only request, that in the future we make sure that every player is paying if we're going to a pay-to-play system.
Any questions to this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of Senate Bill 1397, please come forward. We do have another bill here. We do have a hard stop at 9:45, so try to move things along if we can, please.
Hello, my name is Maxine Gill, and I'm testifying on behalf of Missouri Coalition for the Environment. I'll keep it brief. We want to go on the record in support of this bill. We think the DNR does a great job with engaging all stakeholders in their fee process, and we're in support of this bill. Thank you.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of Senate Bill 1397, anybody here in opposition of Senate Bill 1397?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ray McCarty, President of Associated Industries in Missouri, and if there were a friendly against box, that's what we would check. We're in favor of adjusting the fee, but not necessarily removing the cap at this time, so it's good to hear the DNR is willing to look at that. But as the bill progresses, we'll be working on trying to figure out what that number should be. We agree it's 5,000 is too low. It needs to be changed to something. The department has been having stakeholder meetings, although I think the last couple of stakeholder meetings have been canceled. So we're looking forward to continuing those discussions, and hopefully we can come up with a number that helps everybody and keeps the program administered by DNR, not the EPA. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up, in opposition of 1397, anybody here for informational purposes only? Seeing none, Senator, do you have any closing comments?
Thank you.
That will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 1397. Just real quick, like I say, we do have a hard stop at 9:45. Another quick announcement. It's always great to have interns in the building. We really work with them. Christian does a great job, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't recognize we have a special intern here today. If she'll please stand. We have Claire with us today, who is... If you haven't figured out, that's my daughter. So anyway, Senator, appreciate that. And Senator, you are welcome to start anytime you're ready on Senate Bill 1427. And like I said, we do need to stop at 9:44, so the Senator
Not a problem, I'll be
has
brief.
Picture taken, so.
Oh, did I dress nice enough for the picture?
I think you're good. Yeah, you're okay.
Kind of forgot about that. State Senator Curtis Gregory, 21st District. Before you is Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 1427. We went ahead and made this mirror language what came out of the House Committee. Very simply, what all this does, if you pull it out, the main change is going to be, I believe, on page 15, where we say agricultural non-point sources and agricultural stormwater discharges and return flows from irrigated agriculture shall be exempt from permitting. This is something that has been picked up, I feel like is maybe a little ambiguous in terms of how one might read and interpret it. And without this, we think that at some point in time, we could be required to get a permit any single time we want to go apply fertilizer to our farm fields. We're just trying to look and get rid of that ambiguity inside of this certain set of statutes. With that, we have to take any questions.
Any questions for the Senator? Hearing none. Anybody here to testify in favor of Senate Bill 1427, please come forward.
Good afternoon. Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Derek Steen. I serve as the Director of Public Policy for the Missouri Corn Growers Association. Appreciate Senator Gregory for bringing this bill forward again. We brought this bill forward, the Senator did, a couple of years ago, and we're happy that it's back. And we have made some changes to the bill, and those changes were made in consultation with DNR. We do think the changes in the House substitute bill still gives the intent that we wanted, while clarifying and certainly focusing the bill specifically on agriculture. Missouri Corn believes this bill will present an opportunity to clarify and align state law with current state and federal environmental regulations, ensuring that routine agricultural practices, including soil and water conservation measures, are never subject to permitting under the Missouri Clean Water Law. We think that there is current sort of ambiguity, like Senator Gregory mentioned, because of some specific language in the Missouri Clean Water Law, which we're not touching at this point. We're just adding some clarity about agricultural non-point sources being exempt. Non-point sources, which most activities on farms are outside of CAFOs, are non-point sources. They're explicitly exempt from permitting in both federal and state agency water permitting regulations. These sources are found, of course, far and wide on the rural landscape. A few examples, of non-point sources on a farm include field terraces and field tile drainage systems, applying fertilizer, but also in the livestock arena, you're talking cattle corrals, feeding, breeding, overwintering areas and lots, creek crossings for livestock. Basically almost any activity on a farm. So what we're talking about here is providing clarity in the Missouri Clean Water Law that farms outside of CAFOs won't be subject to permitting under the Clean Water Law, something I think we can all get behind. I'll also mention that we think this clarification is also important to ensure that agricultural conservation practices that remain eligible into the future for state voluntary soil and water conservation incentives and cost share programs, for example, the ones offered by the Missouri Soil and Water Conservation Program, which of course are designed to help reduce non-point source water pollution. Their continued eligibility is made more certain by this bill because voluntary cost share programs through that program are not eligible or not offered to those types of agricultural production activities that are permitted, like CAFOs. So, I just think that this bill will also help ensure that the cost share program at the Missouri Soil and Water Conservation Program remains viable for the long term. So ultimately, it's my belief that this bill will provide important regulatory certainty to Missouri farmers, ranchers, and landowners, as well as to our state agency partners at the Missouri DNR. That concludes my comments. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions to this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up in favor of Senate Bill 1427, please come forward.
All right, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Ben Travelis with Missouri Soybean Association. I think Derek with Missouri Corn Growers covered it well, so I won't reiterate any of his comments. I know Senator Bernstetter is excited for his picture to be taken, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Whitten?
Ready to rock and roll.
Any questions? Thank you for your testimony. Next up in favor of Senate Bill 1427.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Mark Figgenbaum with Missouri Farm Bureau testifying in support. We think that this bill provides a lot of regulatory clarity to our non-point producers, and for that reason, we're in support.
Any questions to this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up in favor of 1427, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, Shannon Cooper this morning on behalf of the Missouri Cattlemen's Association. Want to just go on record in support. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions to this witness? Seeing none,
Thank
thank you for
you.
your testimony. Next up in favor, Senate Bill 1427.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tony Benz, representing the Missouri Agribusiness Association. We like to go on record in support.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up in favor of Senate Bill 1427. Seeing none, anybody here in opposition of Senate Bill 1427?
Good morning, Senators. My name is Mary Culler, and I am a resident of Northeast Missouri, originally a native of Southwest Missouri, and a graduate of Southwest Missouri State. I am here today representing the Missouri Stream Team Watershed Coalition. So for the last 8 years, I've worked as the executive director of that organization. It's a statewide nonprofit 501c3 here in the state, and we are made up of volunteers that work daily and weekly to preserve Missouri's waterways. And so I've been in Missouri in the Midwest for the last 22 years of my career, working to try to conserve our state's rivers and streams. So I understand now we are looking at a Senate committee substitute. Is that correct? And not the original? Sounds like it. But I think a couple things to address with this is that we just heard that this is meant to provide clarity for the agricultural community. I've lived on a corn, soybean, and wheat farm for the last 15 years. I've lived in an agricultural community the last 15 years. These 7 years prior to the position I currently work in, I worked for the Missouri Department of Natural Resources at the Northeast Regional Office. We cover 30 counties, and I worked in compliance assistance for permits. In the state of Missouri, there's almost 88,000 farms, and so if you did a little math in the region of Northeast Missouri, maybe 22,000 farms. The number of phone calls I got from farmers asking if they needed a permit was 0. I have never heard DNR staff having a question from a corn or soybean farmer or a cattle farmer asking whether or not they need a permit. And so I just have a real hard time believing that there is that much uncertainty from actual farmers on whether or not they need a water pollution permit. And I think if there was uncertainty that the USDA offices where these farmers go to sign up for, whatever the latest taxpayer-funded payment is, whether it's the latest disaster relief or conservation program, I think those offices that are in every county that every farmer knows very well would be a great place to have public information awareness about what is their actual requirement under Missouri Clean Water Law. So I think we need to be really, careful about if we're just going to delete 2 words. Well, in the original bill, it's two words, water contaminant source. Now we have the committee substitute that is just adding in non-point sources, I believe. We need to be really careful about what the deletion of 2 words or the addition of 1 word does, and are there unintended consequences from that. I'm understanding that potentially, when you look at the previous version of the bill, when we think about water contaminant source, there are a lot of other industries in the state of Missouri, for-profit industries that are non-agricultural in nature that require a permit. And those are, for example, limestone quarries, airports, municipal storm sewer systems, metal fabrication, salvage yards, solid waste transfer stations, land disturbance that are of non-agricultural nature. And so my concern prior to the committee substitute was that, if you erase water contaminant source, you could be taking a baby step towards not needing to require a permit for these industrial stormwater sites. And so that would be a weakening of the Missouri Clean Water Law. Now, with the committee substitute, adding non-point sources as being exempt from permitting, I think it could be a baby step towards saying that CAFOs are not needing to be permitted, because CAFOs are actually not point sources. They have a lagoon that stores wastewater, and then that is land applied. So I think I would just encourage the Senate to exercise some caution in what happens when you delete words or add words in. And if there's the argument that, well, the federal law regulates these, and so we can't be less strict than federal law, we need to think really hard about if we are wanting to rely on the federal government to protect water in Missouri. We're seeing one of the largest rollback of environmental regulations that we've seen. You know, in my career, I'm working with people that are in their 60s, and they've never seen anything like this at the federal level. Do we want to rely on the federal government? Because at what point are they going to delete a word or add a word that then is going to affect our Missouri Clean Water Law? And then we have to go back through a process to try to strengthen our Missouri Clean Water Law. So for those reasons, in opposition to this, because I believe it's a step to weaken Missouri Clean Water Law, which we've seen over the last 10 years, just a slow weakening of that. So with that, thank you for your time.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Just to clarify, Senator, you have a sub that mirrors the House version. We emailed that to all the committee members yesterday. I think the House version is moving a little bit quicker. If anybody would like a copy of that substitute, please come to our office and we will supply that. So anyway, next up in opposition to 1427, please come forward. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Hello once again. My name is Maxine Gill, and I'm here testifying on behalf of Missouri Coalition for the Environment. I think I'll echo many of the things that Mary just said so eloquently, and I won't, belabor the points that she's already made. But I wanted to emphasize that so our testimony really pertains more to the original bill and not the substitute, but I think that many of the points still stand, because adding the exemption for non-point sources for agriculture is extremely broad. And our worry here is not that suddenly non-point source operations are going to have to be permitted. They already don't have to be permitted, and there are already very explicit exemptions in the Missouri water law for agricultural stormwater and irrigation backflow. However, the definition for point source, it's pretty broad right now, and I think that this would open up the floodgates to essentially have various industries argue that their operations are non-point source when maybe they're categorized and permitted as point sources right now. So for instance, CAFOs are very explicitly stated as point sources in the point source definition in the statute, but AFOs are not, and they're subject to permitting requirements not to the same degree at all as CAFOs. It's much less stringent, but they could potentially argue, because they're not explicitly listed, that they shouldn't be permitted as point source pollution. I think similarly, I know that Heather mentioned the Denali bill from a few years ago that was passed nearly unanimously through this legislature, because I think everyone recognized the issue with an industry just subverting regulations because they are combining multiple waste streams and then land applying that. So I worry that this could be a potential avenue for then Denali to argue that their operations and land application are non-point source and so not be regulated. Really, the Clean Water Law is the most fundamental protection that Missouri has for its water bodies, and I think in this draft of our 303D list, our list of impaired waters, we have, I think, 528 different waters that are impaired, and that's an underestimate because some are not tested and some lack enough testing to be able to list them with certainty as impaired. And for about 85% of those, they're impaired with non-point sources. So this is something that we don't want to limit DNR's ability to regulate non-point sources. And so I would like to ask that this exemption be narrowed and specified rather than leaving it so broad as agricultural non-point sources. Thank you, and I'll take any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in opposition of 1427, please come forward.
I feel nervous. Chairman Bean and members of the committee, my name is Ethan Duke, and I'm from Saline County. I'm the senator's neighbor here, and even though I'm in opposition to his bill, he can text me at any time if he needs anything, and I'm always there for him. He's mighty neighborly, so. I work at the intersection. By the way, I'm from the Missouri River Bird Observatory, and I work at the intersection of science and data and conservation. And I just want to provide some brief context here. We heard some really good, excellent comments there from Mary Culler and MCE and Maxine. And I've just been watching this for a while now, and I think we get lost in the weeds a little bit when we look at these types of regulatory changes. Because over time, I've looked and watched, and it'll just be like these little changes, like in 2016, little changes to the Clean Water Commission, agricultural stormwater exemptions in 2018, limits on local control in 2019, expanded regulatory exemptions in 23, and then there's more proposals in 24 and 25. And I remember when you proposed this similar legislation in the House, when you were over there 2 years ago, early morning, and I think that members in committee, because you deal with so many different bills and so many different topics, I think sometimes we need to kind of contextualize where this is at. Historically, when we are dealing with pollution, like when the Clean Water Act and all that came about, we had to deal with like pipes just putting stuff right out into rivers, and we did the Cuyahoga River on fire and things like that. So our major threat to our water quality then was point source pollution. Well, since then it's really switched. Now it's 95%. Most of our pollution is non-point source. And, Mary mentioned the rollbacks and federal legislation. Currently, I don't know if we have very much enforcement of any non-point source pollution at this point. And also, I heard about the exemption of CAFOs already not being part of this. Is that correct? In this, like CAFOs aren't part of this verbiage change. It doesn't apply to them. Is that right?
Senator, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, there is only one level of CAFO that does not have to have any type of permitting. Anything over a certain number of animal units does have to get permitting for purposes of nutrient management plans.
Right. So does this legislation apply to
I don't believe so, because even if you are in a non-permitted CAFO and there was manure to come running out of your pits into a stream, you can very much point to that and say that's point source.
Correct. Okay. Yes. Thank you for that clarity. So my concern really isn't those on site, which is very clear permitting on site for facilities. Setbacks, all that stuff, it's black and white. DNR has a great job on that. But that's not really where the problem mostly comes about. The problem is we have just so much waste and so much nutrients, and we're putting it out in the landscape, and that's where the non-point problems begin. That's the reason why we have a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. That's a reason for a lot of our impairments, and it's just maths. And I think there's a lot of great solutions out there, but to limit that kind of permitting or oversight in any way is probably going backwards. I think we have over 500 listed streams, and not all of them are even tested. So I think we need to be moving forward to cleaning up our water, not making more exemptions. And I agree with the comments earlier from Missouri Soybeans about really worried about what the day-to-day operations are and impacting small family farm operations. But we're talking about massive amounts of nutrients in the waterways here. And so I just want to contextualize all that, thinking about DNR's role and how they're really limited already. And thinking about this non-point source pollution. A few months ago, I was down at a public meeting in Pierce City where there are many concerned community members, over 200, filled the gymnasium. And they were really upset about 8 new CAFOs coming in with 1.3 million birds. That's not only non-point source pollution, but it's also water consumption. There's only 2 people there in favor. One was an industry lawyer who got booed, and probably not his first time. And then the other was another industry representative. And there's nothing DNR could do. They did hydrological testing. This is karst geography. This water is going to be impacting everybody's wells. And DNR couldn't deny those permits. So we already don't have a lot of control. And I would recommend that we think of this bill in that context, and I think it may do more harm than good, and that's why we're in opposition to it. And thank you for listening.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Sorry.
Senator, you might want to invite him over to dinner, I believe, tonight. So,
Just lucky enough that he's just out of range of my driver's swing, maybe.
You're about
All right.
800 meters up.
Next up, in opposition to 1427, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep this very brief because I know you've got a picture to get to. So, Mr. Chair, members of this committee, I thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning. I'm Jamie Blair, and I'm here on behalf of Missouri Rural Crisis Center and our farm and rural members throughout the state. Clean water is vital to our state, and I echo the sentiments of Mary Kohler, Ethan Duke, and Maxine Gill. For that reason, we'd like to register our opposition to this bill. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in opposition of Senate Bill 1427, please come forward. Seeing none, anybody here for informational purposes only?
Sorry, we were not prepared because we were not actually planning on testifying on this, but with some of the questions and comments that have been raised, we felt like we should probably provide some information on this. As you all are very, very aware, I'm Heather Peters with the Missouri Department of Natural Resources Water Protection Program.
And Allie Gatwood, Legislative Liaison, Missouri Department of Natural Resources.
See, she's got to keep me in line. So we understand, and you all obviously very much understand, that water statutes and water regulations are extremely complex. They're covered in dozens and dozens of laws. And so this clarity and some of the questions that were raised are the exact reason I think that this proposed change is being requested. We do not have the authority to permit non-point sources. We do have the authority to permit CAFOs. They are defined in the statute, both state and federal, as point sources. So we absolutely have that, and this bill does not change that authority. We have the authority to regulate many, many other sites where is it a point source or is not part of the question, because other parts of our law specifically say that we must regulate and we must permit stormwater, MS4s, all these other facilities. That's built into the laws that you have already established. That's built into the federal requirements, and it's built into our associated state regulations. We explain those exceptions and those exemptions from our law and our regulations in our regulations. So the questions that are being raised, I think, exemplify the questions that we are seeing in some of the litigation. And I think the concerns associated with the lack of clarity on the exemption for non-point sources that we believe is perfectly clear in the law already. We have had this litigated multiple times. We've won every single one of those challenges, yet we still have that litigation that arises. That litigation costs us at least $50,000 even when we win. So even when we win the case, the department and our CAFO and other sites that are in these debates still have to address those. And so any clarity is intended, I think, at least from our perspective, we understand the need for that clarity because we see that litigation that comes with the ambiguity that you saw raised today. So if you have any questions, we're more than happy to answer that. But we did want to clarify that CAFOs would not be affected by this. There are AFOs that we have to declare as CAFOs when you see the example that was mentioned. If they discharge directly into a water of the state, we actually have fundamental regulations, federal and state, that say we can define an AFO as a CAFO, and then it also becomes a point source. So we also have authority to regulate discharges that occur without permitting them. So we're talking about a specific subset of our authority. So just because you're a non-point source, if you impact waters of the state, if you cause harm to your neighbor's use of that water, we still retain the authority to address that issue with or without a permit. And so I think that it's important to understand the nuances of some of what we're talking about here. And I'm happy to answer any questions. We just want to provide that.
Any question for these witnesses? Senator McCreary.
Thanks. Would you be able to share just a few of those cases, like a sampling of those, so that I could kind of get a sense of what you're talking about? I'm certainly not asking for everything, but I'm just
absolutely.
I'm just curious to see what some of those would look like.
I think we can absolutely get some of those to you. I mean, we have addressed AFOs, we have addressed small farms, we have addressed it. But prior to the Denali bill, I'll use that as one of the examples because that was kind of a driver. Prior to the Denali bill, that was just considered a fertilizer and it was being land applied. And when it ran off of properties, we actually took action against Denali for that improper land application. It wasn't required to have a permit. That doesn't mean we didn't take enforcement action and make them address the issue, establish agreements with us to prevent that violation from ever happening again. So those kind of things absolutely can be addressed. What the law has already done is establish very clearly where we do have authority and where we do not have authority for permitting versus corrective action and penalties for inappropriate behaviors and actions. But we're more than happy to get additional information to you.
Thank you. And I know that our colleagues in that impacted area really appreciate your work on the Denali situation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the witnesses? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, for informational purposes only. Seeing none, Senator, do you have any closing comments?
Well, thank you for the hearing. 2 years ago, when the version we had filed then, there was a lot of question that it would affect federal funding that we were getting, so that's when we kind of shelved it and got this worked up. To my knowledge, this does not affect any type of funding we're getting from the federal government, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator. This will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 1427. No further business coming for the committee. I move that we adjourn. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Those are contrary, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.